Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, my name is NURUL AINA ARIFAH binti Muhammad Zain and my number MATRIC is 23004448. Definition of inflation is an increase in the level of prices of the goods and services that households buy. It is measured as the rate of change of those prices. Typically, prices rise over time, but prices can also fall. It's a situation called deflation. What is causes of inflation? Inflation is typically caused by demand outpacing supply. But the historical reasons for this phenomenon can be further broken down into demand pull inflation, cost push inflation, increased money supply, devaluation, rising wages, and monetary and fiscal policies. Firstly, demand pull is the most common cause for a rise in prices when more buyers want a product or service than the seller has available. It's interesting because unless there's a reason the supply is diminished that affects cost, the price doesn't have to increase. It rises because sellers recognize that buyers are willing to pay more if it's something they really want. An example of this type of demand pull inflation would be tickets to Super Bowl. There are only so many seats available. More people want to attend the Super Bowl than the number of available seats. Because of this, third-party sellers can charge thousands of dollars for a ticket with a face value equal to a fraction of that amount. Secondly, cost push. Cost push sometimes prices rise because costs go up on the supply side of the equation. This increased supply side costs such as material, wages, and energy make the product or service more expensive. Therefore, the seller has to charge more to maintain a profit. Depending on the amount of demand, sellers may not always be able to recover all of the increase, but instead reduce their profit and absorb some of the cost themselves. Other than that, increased money supply is also the main cause of inflation. Ideally, an increase in the supply of money in the economy lowers interest rates, which encourages spending and investment and helps grow gross domestic product. However, this process known as quantitative easing, initiated by the Federal Reserve, can also lead to demand pull inflation when the money supply increases faster than economic growth. This happened during the COVID-19 pandemic. Governments worldwide, including the US, began massive financial support programs including trillions in cash to Americans. This influx of money in the economy increased demand for goods and services, and for a variety of reasons, businesses could not keep up. The result inflation and the eventual need for the Federal Reserve to begin cutting back on QE to slow down inflation. The most obvious impact of inflation is the loss of purchasing power. As purchasing power erodes, many feel the impacts of their budget, but those on a low income or fixed income often feel the effect the most. As inflation takes hold, it's important to monitor how well your income keeps pace with the change. If it's within your power, negotiate for a raise or switch up your income stream to keep up with rising costs. Second, higher interest rates to Federal Reserve can be impact of inflation. This has a relatively limited toolkit to tame inflation. The option they commonly turn to first is usually raising interest rates. As the Fed pushes interest rates the higher, it gets more expensive to borrow money. The average consumer takes advantage of borrowing to make major purchases, like a home or vehicle, a reality. This means rising interest rates impact household purchases across the country. If you have any debt with a variable interest rate, you'll face higher costs as your interest rates increase. Next, higher prices for everything when everything is more expensive. The impacts are felt by everyone. After all, it's impossible to go without the basics such as food, electricity, but But with rising costs, it can become more difficult to make ends meet. So, as Malaysians, we all know that Malaysians currently face inflation, which is food inflation. What is new inflation in Malaysia? Deputy Finance Minister Dato Seri Ahmad Maslan says Malaysia's current OPR currently stand at 3%, while the headline inflation rate is low to 1.9% year-on-year in September 2023. What is food inflation in Malaysia? Recognition for industry commitment, rapid increases in food prices have been one of the main drivers of quickening inflation in Malaysia last year, which saw food inflation increase between 3.6% and 7.2% throughout the year. There are also some causes food inflation in Malaysia. The market's demand for products and services rose sharply, exceeding the supply and offers made at the time by suppliers, traders and sellers. In order to fulfill the enormous demand from their clients, traders and sellers are finally left with no choice but to increase the price of goods and services. However, the rise in food prices is also induced by the rise in prices of inputs such as fertilizers, chemicals, land, labor, and machinery. Although the government protects the prices of petrol and diesel, the price of fertilizers has risen by 70% within the last 2 years and wages has also gone up. We keenly feel the impact of rising food inflation as our food expenditures increase over time. In Malaysia, for example, chicken prices have risen by 17% year-on-year to Rm10 per kilogram in June 2022 due to rising costs. So, how does Malaysia deal with inflation? In Malaysia, the stabilization of food prices is achieved via 3 means, which is subsidized, control of prices, and control of supply. Subsidies are meant to help the poor and to stabilize prices from price shock. In addition, subsidizing the production of certain goods help promote domestic industries. However, compared to the other countries, the rising prices have been less extreme. In Malaysia, we have full subsidies and price controls that keep inflation lower. However, such measures could come at a large cost to the country. This is because the government will have to keep spending a large amount to keep prices low. If food is ground for the purpose of feeding the community or nation, food insecurity levels will go down. Farmers can produce more food crops and later on cash crops when there are enough food crops in the market. There will be less risk of commercialization of food if it's sufficient in the market. As a Muslim, we must figure out what does Islam say about inflation. Islam commands moderation to avoid both extremes so that the aggregate demand stays stable and prices remain stable and inflation does not rise. People ask you what they should spend. Then you say whatever you spend out of your rate must be for parents and the relative and orphans and the needy and the wayfarers. How does Islam tackle inflation? Inflation is caused either by having surplus means of payments, including mainly quantity of money in a society, or shortage of general supply. In other words, it deals with supply and demand, but in a general manner that touches all goods and services in economy. It may occur in a society that deals with social transactions, and at the same time, it may happen in an interest-free society. Sharia does not approve of any action on the part of people temporarily, such as withdrawal of metal currency for other industrial uses. Our government very often printing more money to finance its expense of our internal debt payment. Even if such action is deemed a solution to a problem, for any solution in Islamic economy must not involve interest. Indexation is suggested but the International Fee Academy refused because it may be taken as a justification for interest. In fact, it's very often intermediate with interest. Arbitration is suggested by some ulama, especially in the end of 12th century of Hijrah. Arbitration can be imposed by courts and certain rules can be set for it. In my opinion, this is the best solution because the effect of inflation on people varies. As some become richer, well off and get higher income, others become poorer and get lower income. In loans and bank deposits, indexation is completely unacceptable since any indexation in loans is interest. So, that's all from me. Hopefully, this information is useful for you guys. Bye!